When Emily and I moved into the old house in the country, we were filled with hope and excitement. The house was charming, nestled on a quiet piece of land surrounded by dense woods. It was far from town and about a mile from our nearest neighbor. It was the perfect escape from the bustle of city life, or so we thought. The first few days were peaceful. We spent our time unpacking and exploring our new surroundings. The air was fresh, the scenery breathtaking, and the wildlife abundant. When we first saw the old house, we smiled. It was definitely going to be a fixer-upper, but that's exactly why Emily and I loved it so much. The whole exterior needed fresh paint, with its original coat peeling, and completely gone in places. As we looked closer, we began to notice a few things that seemed odd. On the outside of the house, we noticed what looked like faded red paint, or more accurately, stain, on the wooden door frame and window frames. Whatever it was, it had dulled to a rusty, brownish red, partially worn away by time and the elements. The edges of the stains appeared chipped and cracked in places, blending into the rough gray wood beneath. The overall effect gave the door frame and windows a mottled, patchy look, which seemed out of place against the rustic charm of the property. We chalked it up to the previous owners having peculiar design choices. Inside the old house, Emily and I discovered several pieces of jade, carefully placed on every windowsill, their green surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. The stones seemed deliberate in their arrangement, as if positioned with a specific purpose in mind, adding an air of mystique to our new home. The contrast of the jade's vibrant green against the weathered wood of the sills made them stand out, leaving us both intrigued and unsettled by the presence of these enigmatic tokens. But the strangest thing was the line of ground cornmeal that encircled the old house, a thin, deliberate trail that hugged the foundation like a protective barrier. As Emily and I followed the cornmeal's path, we felt an unsettling mix of curiosity and dread, wondering who had placed it there and for what reason. The delicate grain stood out against the rough, weathered earth, whispering of old rituals and forgotten fears. As strange as these things were, they paled in comparison to what happened next. During our first few weeks living in our cozy, old country house, we began to notice the strange behavior exhibited by the wildlife. It started with the birds. They would gather on the roof and fence, hundreds of them, all facing the house and watching us with an eerie stillness. Their eyes seemed almost intelligent, as if they were observing our every move. Emily tried to brush it off, saying it was just the local wildlife being curious. One morning, as I was having my coffee on the porch, I noticed a deer standing at the edge of the woods. It was completely motionless, its eyes fixed on me. This went on for several minutes before it turned and walked back into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. "John, did you see that deer?" Emily asked, joining me on the porch. Her voice was tinged with unease. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound unconcerned. "Probably just curious." But the deer kept returning, each time bringing more with it. They would stand in a circle, all staring at the house, unmoving. It was unsettling, to say the least. One night, we heard a rustling noise outside our bedroom window. Peeking through the curtains, we saw several foxes sitting in a line, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. They didn't move, didn't blink. They just sat there, staring. "What's going on, John?" Emily whispered, her hand gripping mine tightly. "I don't know, but it's not normal," I replied, feeling a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. The final straw came when we found our garden in disarray. Plants were uprooted, and animal tracks crisscrossed the soil. Among the tracks, there were large humanoid footprints, but with elongated toes and claws. It looked as if something had walked through on two legs, something not entirely human. We decided to set up trail cameras around the property, hoping to capture whatever was causing this. The next morning, we reviewed the footage. What we saw chilled us to the bone. We saw animals moving during the night, but nothing unusual. But at one point, the camera flickered, and we saw a shadowy figure in the distance, just at the edge of the woods. It was tall, too tall to be human, and it moved with an unnatural grace. One afternoon, I went into town for groceries, hoping to get a break from the unsettling atmosphere of the old house. While perusing the aisles of the local store, I struck up a conversation with a friendly Native American man named James. At first, our talk was pleasant, filled with small-town chatter about the weather and local events. But when I mentioned where Emily and I had moved, his entire demeanor changed. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by a guarded expression. He no longer seemed to want to talk at all. Determined to understand what was happening, I persisted, hoping this person might have some insight into the strange occurrences at our home. James was polite but evasive, clearly uncomfortable discussing the matter. Eventually, he pulled me aside and spoke in a hushed tone. "You must be careful," he said, his voice low and serious. "There are bad spirits in and around your property, evil that has gone unresolved. I will not speak further on the matter." He handed me a small leather pouch containing herbs of some kind. "Give this to your wife. Tell her to keep it with her at all times. Keep it close." I relayed the message to Emily and gave her the pouch. She looked skeptical but agreed to carry it with her. That night, the unsettling noises began. We heard footsteps on the porch, rustling in the bushes, and scratching sounds on the outside of the house. Each night, the noises grew louder and more persistent. Emily and I didn't really enjoy our new home very much after that. The atmosphere in and around our property grew heavy with dread. We felt watched, as if eyes were always on us, unseen but undeniably present. The animals continued their strange behavior, and the shadowy figure appeared more frequently in the camera footage, always lurking just out of clear view. Not long after, we decided to leave. We couldn't stay in a place where we felt constantly threatened. On our last night, we heard a series of knocks on the walls, coming from all sides of the house. Whatever was outside circled our house 4 times, knocking and scratching as it went. As we waited for it to circle a 5th time, everything went ominously quiet. It felt like a warning, or perhaps a farewell from whatever dark presence had claimed this land. We didn't sleep. We just waited for the dawn to break so we could escape. As we drove away, I glanced back at the old house. For a moment, I thought I saw the shadowy figure standing in the yard, watching us leave. But when I blinked, it was gone. To this day, Emily and I don't talk about what happened at the old house. We've moved on, but the memories linger, a constant reminder that some places are better left alone. We never confronted the shadowy evil directly, but its presence was undeniable, leaving us with a deep-seated fear of what lurks just beyond the edge of sight. If you ever find yourself in a place where the animals act strangely and shadows move where they shouldn't, take heed. Sometimes, it's what you don't see that you should fear the most.